every channel in it is flushed individually. So instead of like a flushing pump, everything going down everything, and path of least resistance is the biopsy suction. It's going to take the most. With this, the air water, if there's an auxiliary water jet or an elevator channel, they're all getting the proper enzymatic that they're supposed to be. That's a patented piece, or a patent pending piece we put together as well.
What if one conversation could save a life? What if one new process or new product could save a patient from surgical harm? Broadcasting from a hospital basement near you, you're listening to the Beyond Clean Canada podcast, the voice of medical device reprocessing from C to C to C. Each week, we spotlight the people, processes, and products from around the country and the world that are disrupting our profession and helping you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Join us as we have the kinds of conversations that matter and give our industry the kind of voice that it deserves. And now it's time to go True North strong and beyond clean.
Welcome all you clean freaks to another exciting episode of Beyond Clean Canada. Buckle up as we're going to sit down with Doug Brown from Torvin.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean Canada, the voice of sterile processing from C to C to C.
Welcome, everybody. We have a very exciting guest for you today, Doug Brown from Torvin. So, Doug, we've been trying to get you on the show now for a little bit, and we're here. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, first off, thank you, Stacey and Barry, for having me. I appreciate this. So I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing with Torvin Medical. I've been in this industry, not to date myself, going on 40 years now. Torvin itself has been around since 2010. Chris Glencross, the president and founder, and I have actually worked together for 21 years, going back to our days with Carson Group and Olympus. And then I actually joined Chris in 2014 with this company, and we've taken it from 4 people to now today we have probably over 60. So it's been a very interesting run so far with what we've been doing.
That's great, Doug. That's great. So we'll get into our first question then. When it comes to designing and producing Torvin medical products, what is one of the first key steps and why?
Well, I think the biggest thing for us is we have a lot of knowledge in this company, both from a clinical standpoint and from engineering. And the one thing that we do is we take that clinical knowledge, but we also listen to end users. And we pride ourselves in incorporating suggestion recommendations, if we can, into our products from that standpoint. We also try to keep ahead of the curve as well with what we're producing into these sinks and our scope cabinets and just our other products as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug, for coming on the podcast. And, it's Stacey and I are both frontline technicians, and we've talked about this before, and it's so refreshing to have a company like Torvin Medical that actually talks with MDR instead of talking at MDR, like a lot of other companies. And I know Torvin seems to see challenges through the lens of an MDR tech's perspective. And this kind of leads into this next question for like the research and development and kind of what goes into that for you guys. And we know, like said, Stacey and I have been frontline technicians, a lot of wear and tear on the body, and Torvin is dedicated to reducing daily strain on technicians. How do you test and create such ergonomical equipment that's effective?
What I can say, Barry, is personally, even prior to Torvan, I was with another company that was producing sinks, and we were producing ergonomic, height adjustable sinks back in those days as well. And, the important thing is making sure you've got, the proper lifting columns. We use electromechanical lifting columns. And just, making sure that people understand, proper ergonomics as to when they're working at a sink, how high the sink should be, how they should be standing. It's all about education from that standpoint. One thing we've also done in the sinks, and I will take credit for it, although it wasn't my idea, but I had a sterile processing technician mention to me one time it'd be really nice if the leading edge of the sink, instead of being 90 degrees, was flat. So like a 45 beveled edge. So I took that idea that somebody else had, brought it back to the engineers, and they said, yeah, we can do it. So we've incorporated that in all of our sinks now as well. So just something like that, too, little things that also helps. It eliminates pinch points. It eliminates wrist droop. I've had one hospital say they were having carpal tunnel syndrome in the past. They weren't any longer. Now, is it related to this? I don't know, but it makes sense that it possibly could. So I think education on ergonomics, is very important, and understanding proper positioning and everything. We do supply a anti-fatigue mat with every sink as well. That's important as well from the whole standpoint for comfort and that.
Speaking of ergonomics, Doug, do you remember, I believe it was my chapter that hosted an education session, and you were there presenting, as well as, I think we may have talked about this on a previous episode too, Barry, but I had the physiotherapist come do a session. And Doug was there, and remember they talked about the importance of adjusting things so that way your elbows are at like a 90 degree, and that's how you should be working. And because so often techs fall into lazy patterns where they're like hunched over, and that, trust me, if I could tell the young ones coming in now that 16 years down the road, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. So you were talking about the flat side. Sorry, you were just mentioning it. What is that, like the edge that the tech would lean on then? I'm just trying to visualize it. Okay.
Yeah, leading edge of the sink, so the front of the sink.
Yep.
So instead of being just like 90 degrees, it's beveled 45. And so that when their forearms are there, it's on a flat surface, not on the sharp corner.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes. Or just like digging into like the hips or stomachs or...
The other thing about ergonomics that always excites me is when, I had one hospital in particular that told me they bought a height adjustable sink from us, and a year later they said, Doug, this sink paid for itself in the first year. And I go, what do you mean? They said, well, we had a technician who in previous years would be off 2-3 months on disability. Well, guess what? He wasn't off this year because he was working in proper ergonomics. So that was a very interesting piece of information, and it excited me. And then, after hearing people have had the sinks for a while say, I used to be so tired at the end of the day. No, I'm not. Again, because they're working properly. So it's a very important piece. Yeah.
Where I'm presently working, we don't have any of the adjustable sinks or anything like that. And just seeing different posts from you and Shannon Robertson and stuff like that, and just the sinks with all the bells and whistles, with the steam guns, water pistols, just everything like that. And just even the adjustables too, like you said, MDR technicians come in all shapes and sizes, and it's really nice to be able to customize that for yourself, right? Kudos to you guys.
You need to start putting MDR testimony, or what are they, like, on your site. Be like, here's like a little true testimony from this MDR tech who hasn't had to take time off work for a year.
Well, we're actually redoing our website right now, and that is we are going to have a testimonial section. So there we go. We'll make sure of that. So, yeah.
Perfect. That kind of like leads into our next question a little bit, Doug. So there's a huge history when it comes to the beginning of adjustable sinks for the MDRAs. Can you dive a little into the history and kind of explain to our listeners? I know we kind of went there, but let's go a little bit deeper.
Well, like I say, I've been involved in this for 15 years. And it goes back to a previous company that I started with. Actually, when Chris started Torvan, This was an Ottawa-based company that's no longer around. But that's where I really got involved on the whole ergonomics side. And it was interesting because there was a gentleman, Rudy, who unfortunately is no longer with us. He was working with another gentleman, Dave Faulkner from Falcon Fire. And he really felt that ergonomics was an important part. And he was the guy that really got me turned on to it and this previous company. And then we carried on with it at ARC from that standpoint. So prior to that, I really don't know of really many companies that were doing any of this. Everybody was just fixed height for not only sinks, but workstations and all of that. And so for me, that's the history for me. That really
that's
got it started.
Yeah. You're like, this can go somewhere, and it did.
Yes. Now, that said, in Europe, it's been around longer, but Europe was always a step ahead.
I was going to say, we can't, really compare too much there because they've always been 10 steps ahead, in that way. A little history lesson, too, for the listeners. I remember you saying why Torban is named Torban.
Yes. It's actually quite interesting. So again, and this goes back to predating me with the company, but Chris Glencross, who was one of the founders, one of his other partners, gentleman Jeff Broster, who is has left. Chris was in Toronto, and Jeff was in Vancouver. So figure that one out.
Yep. We're not going to give you the answer, but we gave you a big clue there.
No, but there you go.
Go Canada.
Go Canada. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yep. So you can thank Lance for that last question there, Doug.
Yeah.
That came from him.
Okay. All right. So, thank you, Lance.
There you go.
Torban has many creations out there, and one of them is they have deep roots in the vented endoscopy cabinet creation. You guys are one of the first ones to come about with that. Can you share with our listeners and our audience the history of that as well?
So you mean our endoscope, like endoscope cabinets and that?
Yes.
So again, my history with endoscope cabinets goes back to even prior to Torban. I've been someone who's always been strong on proper HEPA ventilation in cabinets and as well as channel purge, et cetera. Prior to anybody really thinking about it. Again, in Europe, it had been around since early 2000s, but it really hadn't taken off over here. Although I got to admit, there was one company who are kind of around, but not, Custom Ultrasonics in the States, that were the leaders. They were the first ones that did it. But so basically with Torban, what we did was, after I had joined Chris, we were looking at things that we needed to do to stand head and shoulders above everybody else. And we really saw that there was the need for endoscope storage, proper endoscope storage. So, and the standards were starting to see that. CSA Z314, AMI ST91 in the US, et cetera. So we had designed a few different cabinets, but in 2015 we sat down, four of us, Lance included actually, so I'll give him some kudos here, having breakfast, and we designed our current cabinets on a napkin. So that classic story. But the important thing that we did, what we've done with cabinets is we've designed things so everything is scalable. People just maybe wanted a HEPA only, but get channel purged later. But ours, that's the way they're designed. They get a HEPA, you can add channel purge after, you can add tracking after as well.
And Doug, I've got to say too, like Stacy too, we've both been in this game for quite a while too, and I've seen that progression from the HEPA filter to the forced air through the channels now, and just to see Torban Medical pushing that technology forward, and it's just going to be interesting to see where it goes from here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And actually, I was just at the SGNA conference in Pittsburgh, and we actually showed a prototype of a new cabinet that we will be launching. That's got some very unique things in it, which is going to be individual channel purging. It will also be testing relative humidity on those channels to show that they're dried. There's also going to be what we're going to call the air knife. So the control body of the scope is very important. People don't realize that that up around the control knobs, that gets all wet in there and it's not dried properly. So we're going to have, it's almost be like a hair dryer blowing onto it. We have applied for patents for all of these, so they're all patent pending right now as well, which is going to be quite interesting. So,
now, do you think with standards, hopefully eventually saying that this is the way that it needs to go, everyone has to upgrade, it will eliminate having to turn those scopes around every 7 days? Because you know how they expire after 7 days, whether or not they've been used. Are these cabinets, do you feel in the future, might be able to push that boundary without risk to patient?
I think so, Stacy. And to that point, we're in the process of setting up a study with a group that actually did the original study for our cabinets on dry times. And they're going to be doing a study where they're going to be, the scope will be stored for 30, 60, 90 days and tested to see, if it's still like whatever ATP test or whatever to determine that it still is usable.
Safe for use. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting, in the U.S., there's a variety of times, and there's discussion down there of, I think it's Kaiser, actually. They're running, who have our cabinets, by the way, they're running scopes up to 30 days. Now, they do have to test them, and it's more the specialty scopes that aren't used on a regular basis, so they just want to make sure if they processed them and maybe it isn't used for a month, so they'll have to test it to make sure. But I really do feel that, yes, proper storage, and that, it'll maintain the scope's viability.
So you can push that boundary of past the 7 days and not having to keep those catalogs to make sure that those scopes are being redone the ones not used, done on that 7th day. That is amazing.
But then it'll come up to, CSA here in Canada, and of course then in the States, AMI and the other standards groups to make those decisions. I know,
yeah, when we had Colleen on the show back in season 1, she said they get a lot of advice from the AMI standards. They read them and then they take statistics, they go to their meetings, they discuss and then create ours, because ours are 2 years, ours will be reevaluated again and redone. So, yeah, maybe we'll see that. And thanks to Torvin, maybe we'll see that new development. Doug, is there anything that you take into consideration, you feel that it's a high priority when it comes to designing MDR departments?
Well, definitely workflow. Yeah. Workflow is huge. And, we actually have a free software on our website.
I was playing around with that.
Yeah. And that's to help design, So basically, being able to make sure with the footprint you have, and we know every place is different, like if it's some of these older facilities, they're kind of limited to floor space and things like that. But being able to take that software and then determine, how they can set up, size of sinks as an example, workstations, but then making sure you've got the proper barrier between, soiled, clean and that, we also build and sell pass-through, not windows, but boxes, and that are been normally in the past used in labs and clean rooms. So instead of a sash window where you open it up and you maybe have a positive pressure room, negative pressure room, with this, you actually, one side opens up, you put your tray of instruments in or whatever, you shut the door. You can't open the other door till it's closed, and then it's accessed that way, which is important. That just helps as well keep the pressures and the like. I don't know how many facilities I've walked into with the sash windows, and it's on a motion sensor. They walk by it and it goes up.
It goes up. Yeah, exactly. And then the decontamination area is our reach away. Yeah.
And then they got a buzzer on it to say it's open. And I was in one place and somebody cut the wires.
Oh, because they didn't want to hear it buzzing anymore?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So
that's
so from that standpoint, but definitely, making sure you've got the definite, you've got soil, then you've got the barrier, then you've got, you're clean, and then even moving on, like 3-stage is really the best way to go if you can. But,
if you can, yeah. If anyone can just access the Okay, so when they go onto your website, and like I said, I was kind of playing around with that little model thing. Anyone can just go on. You don't have to download a program to work it. You can
you just download what's there. You don't have to.
Okay.
It's free.
Okay. So listen, listeners, it's free.
And now, if they want to take it further, we have a couple of engineers who are quite adept with it, and they can take things even further to the point where we can give you a final 3D rendering that almost looks real, which is pretty incredible. So we've also come up with another software we're calling a Sync Configurator, which is going to be very helpful in designing sinks too. And actually, that's another piece. So, that all helps our engineering department as well, but it also makes, end users part of the whole process, which I think is great. So then everything is done to what the requirements are and they fully understand it. So we've got a really strong engineering team here, which is important. We've got some really talented people, which is important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's great. So if you're thinking of redesigning or your department's coming in, check out Doug's website and you can play around with that and reach out to them.
And Doug, I was on the LinkedIn and looking at a couple of different posts recently from Torvan, and one of them was the auto sync. Do you want to elaborate on that for Stacy and I and our audience and just share?
Well, that's a new product that we're launching. We've got one being used at Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital right now. They've been running it for us. So basically what it is auto sync. So it is an automated sync for right now cleaning endoscopes. So basically what we've taken is it's got built-in leak test. It basically has a touch screen that, is intuitive. The scope technician will follow all of that. So they'll do the leak test, which will be a wet leak test. So the sink basin will fill to a certain level that they program in. It's an optional, but we have sink basin lights, which was an idea that came from another tech to us, that, they can have under the water so they can visualize bubbling when they're doing that wet leak test. Then the next step will be once it passes, if it fails, they have an option to move on with that depending on the scope manufacturer's eye of view. But, once it passes, then they hit the next button. It doses automatically the cleaning solution, enzymatic, detergent, whatever they're using, to the concentration based on the water volume. Water temperature is set as well. And then from there, the technician will do the wipe down externally a scope, brush the scope. They will hook it up to the manifold, so all the different connections. And then from there, the sink takes over the rest. Does the flushing, does the contact time, does more flushing. It drains. It's got an air pump just to blow out residual, and then it refills and rinses and everything. So let's say a scope takes about 13 minutes to do properly, which it should, 13 to 15 minutes. Of that time period, the technician now will only be involved with maybe 4 or 5. The rest of that time, they can be, moving on. Maybe they have a second sink. They can be working, getting another scope going. They can be getting scope ready. They can be going to the AER. So it's really going to help workflow and everything. The response at the SG&A for it, where we showed, was phenomenal. So, and again, every channel in it is flushed individually. So instead of, like a flushing pump, everything going down everything, and path of least resistance is the biopsy suction. It's going to take the most. With this, the air water, if there's an auxiliary water jet or an elevator channel, they're all getting the proper enzymatic that they're supposed to be. That's a patented piece, or a patent pending piece we put together as well. So
that's great, Doug. Absolutely. Yeah. And I know I don't do the endoscopic side. I'll have to jump in the room and help out every now and then, but it is a tolling role. Just on the wrists, the hands, everything. So that's going to help.
Yeah. And the thing there, too, is, it takes some of the human element out, but it also gives consistency. So you know that each scope is going to be cleaned properly each and every time.
Absolutely. Well. Yeah, absolutely. Because when you have a tech in there doing 40-something scopes a day, it's no elephant in the room that the last scope of the day is not going to have the same care as the first. Not by I don't we do we put our heart and soul into this job, but those two scopes are not getting the same because that tech is tired by the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah. So I go back to my early days. I sold scopes, and then I go back to they'd be cleaning them in the procedure room with a Sidex boat. So not even brushing, not even so, and then storing them in the case overnight. So it's come a long
yes.
way, and I'm really excited to have been part of this whole progression. So
yeah, and then we will see the day, I believe, when they will be wrapped and sterilized and stored that way. It is coming. I feel that it's coming.
Yeah, there's things coming.
Yeah. And then also, Dev, I remember one of your things quite a few years ago at a conference, and your enzymatic was released at the bottom, not the top.
Yes, correct.
So can you just go into the little, I see how that's so much greater. It eliminates splash because you got that tech going like this afterwards. Just explain to our listeners why you chose to design it that way and how that flows.
Stacey, as you said, so our sinks, we do what's called bottom fill. We still have a faucet there, and you may have to fill a bucket or a pail or something. It's there as a backup if need be, but in all the years we've done it, it's never been required. So basically, there's a mixing valve. So we've got two ways of going about it. We have a mixing valve that would be like your shower at home or your sink. So you kind of get your temperature set, and then it fills from the bottom. And as you said, there's no real splashing, no real aerolization, which is important. Corey Ofsted, a microbiologist out of Minneapolis, did a study last year finding microorganisms from on a tech 10 feet away. She set them up with stuff on their PPE. So very scary if you think about it. There was two reasons why. I wouldn't say that was the first reason why we did it. Really, we did it just to make filling quicker, easier. Enzymatics, is mixed better. But this is turned into becoming a big part of it right now. The other thing we do is we use electronic drains to a push button to open and close. We used to do the mechanical style, which was fine externally. You don't want to be reaching in, but the mechanical ones over time, they're mechanical. They break.
Whereas you lose them. Next thing you know, you're at Home Hardware trying to find one that fits your sink.
Exactly. So we went with the electronic drains. Actually, going on 5 years ago now, and they've been fantastic. Very few problems. And with it, we've built in overflow protection as well. So we have a sensor in the sink. It happens. People walk away, and next thing you know, it's overflowing. So with this, what happens? Yeah. It goes to the sensor, and it opens the sink. The other option we have is e-sync. So the e-sync is autofill, temperature control, dosing, and everything as well. So that's another function. So semi-automating, the sink. With the overflow, if it hits that sensor, the water shuts off. Then that's just because we're being able to program into the software of it.
That's
as
amazing.
Well. So.
That's awesome, Doug. That is awesome. Before we wrap up, Doug, is there anything that you would like to tell our listeners? And maybe how to get a...
Well, I've been in this industry a long time. I spent a lot of time in the OR. I spent a lot of time in endoscopy, but I also spent a lot of time in sterile processing because it was important for me when I'm in with instruments to be down there and, helping people clean them. And that's why I got a real affinity for the MDRD, sterile pro, SPD, CSST, whatever, worldwide.
Whatever it's called.
And it is the most important department in the hospital. Trust me, bar none. You guys go down, how's the OR going to do surgery? How are procedure rooms going to be able to do things that they need sterile product for? So kudos to all of you who do this job. It can be tough. We see it. We try to help, do what we do to make it easier for you. But hey, great crew. Love working with you guys.
Thanks, Doug. Thank you so much for being a guest on Beyond Clean Canada.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
That was a great episode. Doug is so knowledgeable. I've known him for quite a long time now. He has always supported the MDREO I've had him at several little education sessions. So what did you think, Bear?
Loved it. Yeah, he's been a big part of the MDR community for a long time by the sounds of it. And, just like I said, so refreshing to hear.
He's just so passionate.
Yes,
yeah.
And their take on just MDR first, instead of just an afterthought, like we are with some companies at times, right? So,
yeah, absolutely.
And he's so informative too, right? Like I said, he's a cool straight shooter. Yeah.
Oh yeah, great guy. Yeah.
Thanks, Clean Freaks, for joining Stacey and Barry for another episode of the Beyond Clean Canada podcast. And I want to thank Doug Brown from Torvan Medical for sharing his passion and expertise. It was great to have him on. Hope you enjoyed it.
Remember, keep fighting dirty.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Clean Canada, your source for MDR content, education, and inspiration. If you enjoyed this conversation, we'd love to hear from you on the BCCA LinkedIn or Facebook page, or anywhere podcasts are heard. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite app. And until we talk again, keep fighting dirty.